Hi everyone, this is a favorite pillar of ours called surprise, and the reason we call it surprise is this is all about delivering unexpected value. It's about having an expectation set in a prospect or a customer and then exceeding that. And that is really tough to do in this day and age because everyone is so tempted to sort of make all the promises and try to win the business by sort of over-promising. And then that sort of sets you up for under-delivering. But what we have found, what the research shows, is that the number one thing that drives word of mouth and gets people excited and creates advocates for you is that you set a certain expectation and then you blew it away. You know, you really created some unexpected delight among customers. And so if our strategy in marketing is to generate this massive word of mouth, then this surprise pillar is something you'll have to get really good at. So let's take a look at it. You know, a lot of people are always trying to figure out ideas, like what do we do, you know, to really delight customers? And oftentimes they wait until maybe the buying process or after they've purchased. But really, we believe that the surprise begins with the very first interaction with somebody. And so the first step in thinking about your surprise strategy is to map out the different touch points in the customer funnel. And in this case, we're just going to look through a couple of stages. So for example, in the prospecting stage, let's say that you're a business-to-business firm and you're trying to find leads and you know, people that are going to be interested. A lot of times companies will use telemarketing. And man, we all hate telemarketing, right? We hate to get that phone call and they're trying to pitch us something. But what if the phone call was not to try to sell you something right off the bat, but was simply calling to give you something? In other words, you were it was unexpected. You were surprised that somebody called you and was offering something of great value, or even a little bit of value, and they were not asking for anything in return. That would be a surprise, wouldn't it? So that's a tactic that we actually used back in my old company at Microsoft when we did some telemarketing campaigns. We didn't ask for business. We offered value in the form of an on-site training session or maybe a white paper, and then we just sort of left it at that. And so as you can imagine, the openness to have a dialogue and generate interest really increased with that approach. So even in the prospecting stage, it's a good place to think about surprise. The next stage is the proposal stage. Perhaps you're delivering, you know, kind of a typical RFP or even a sort of an unrequested proposal that you're doing a proactive proposal. Think about how to deliver that in a creative way. Perhaps it's a video proposal that goes along with your, you know, maybe required written proposal. There's all kinds of creative things that you can do in the proposal process to surprise and delight people. A lot of people are starting to think about surprise in the transaction or the contract phase. There are times when you can go through a retail store and as you're checking out, they give you a gift card, perhaps for your next purchase or something that you just didn't expect. You know, you got a little bit more than you thought. Another phase of surprise is in the early user experience. What happens when you open the box? Is there something delightful and surprising in the box? What happens when you first use a product? Are there some features that you didn't even expect that get unlocked somehow during this process? And then finally, the entire life cycle of the product or service. Are there ways that you can pick certain points in the life cycle after they've used, you know, maybe you're an auto manufacturer, after a year, maybe there's some new value that you contact the owner about. Maybe it's free maintenance. Maybe it's you know an opportunity like Saturn, the car company Saturn used to do some really creative things with kind of car user groups and inviting people to sort of regional parties, you know, that actually drove Saturn. Those are really good, surprising, positive things to think about. So if you have this sort of mapped out, then all of a sudden you've got a number of different areas where you could say, you know, most people do this at this stage, but why don't we offer just a little bit of incremental value? And it doesn't always have to be financial. It can also be emotional. Oftentimes we just, at Mythology, when we're reaching out to an executive, we like to have sort of a book club. We like to read a lot of marketing books, as you can imagine. And so sometimes just sending out a book with a little note to an executive, say, hey, we think you might appreciate this. We know your company's going through this, and maybe this book applies. So that's sort of a surprise that we use. There are a couple of examples that I want to share with you that I think are great examples of surprise. One is the car company Mini Cooper. They're pretty innovative in the customer experience. And one thing that they recently did is if you're a Mini Cooper owner, you can actually register your car and your ownership. And as you drive by a digital billboard in certain cities, it recognizes that your car is going by, and it will give you a personal message. So, hey Jeff, thanks for driving, thanks for driving by. Imagine the surprise and delight that that particular feature has. Some people criticize that and say, oh, that's a very expensive, crazy thing to do on a billboard. But I guarantee you, if I drove through Philadelphia in my Mini Cooper and it was giving me a personalized welcome, I'd probably make sure that a lot of my friends knew that and give them rides back and forth on that billboard. So this is all about generating word of mouth. So sometimes you can do something a little more expensive to have a handful of people be surprised and then carry that word of mouth out for you, like Mini Cooper did. On a little bit larger scale, Starbucks has quite a bit of customer surprise and delight activities. It's not necessarily easy to get people to pay $4 for a coffee instead of $1. And so the difference between getting your coffee at McDonald's or a local convenience store and getting your coffee at Starbucks has to have this sort of delightful experience. And there's a great book called The Starbucks Experience that you might want to check out. And there's a story in there of a Starbucks barista who went sort of the extra mile and it sort of showcased the surprise and delight of the Starbucks baristas taking personal interest in people. There was a family member of a Afghanistan soldier, from America fighting in Afghanistan, and they got to know each other, and they decided to send Starbucks. The barista decided to start sending a bi-weekly care package of coffee, from that Starbucks. And so every 2 weeks they'd send coffee off to the soldier. And the soldier got pretty excited about that. They set up their own little Starbucks coffee shop. The barista sent the soldier a little Starbucks poster. And so they put it up and they set up their own little Starbucks coffee shop, somewhere in Afghanistan. And they took some photos of that. And of course that went viral, and people got kind of excited about that surprise, that personal care and concern. So that's just an example that happens on a daily basis in various Starbucks stores. And then a lot of people are now aware of this new, relatively new shoe. It started out as a shoe store called Zappos. And they essentially grew from the beginning as a brand that surprised and delighted people. As you know, in the early days of e-commerce, one of the hassles was returning products. If you purchase clothes on the internet, they didn't fit, it's sort of a hassle to sort of return them. So Zappos came up with the surprise of, look, buy the shoes, free shipping, free overnight shipping, and then we'll also take the shoes back with, we'll pay for your return. And so this whole customer experience of building in easy, sort of low, zero risk on the part of the consumer buying experience was a huge surprise, and it was just part of the buying process that Zappos built into their experience, and their brand and their revenue just sort of rocketed, and they've recently been purchased. So those are just some examples of really cool brands and how they use surprise in their process. And so as you think about the buying cycle and ways that you can sort of inject emotional or functional sort of surprise value, I think you'll get really excited about how this generates word of mouth for you.